particular session is on regional war preparation. So it's looking at Talisman, Sabre, AUKUS, and the Fourth Posture Agreements. I'd like to, it's my privilege to introduce our first speaker, Elliot Darcy, who's the Queensland convener of Labour Against War. Elliot's been a trade union organiser. He works with the Rail, Tram and Bus Union, and he's also worked as helping to put together unions for refugees, particularly during the blockade of the Kangaroo Point Hotel. As part of Labour Against War, he's been campaigning against the AUKUS agreement and for an independent Australia, rather than a sub-imperial power beholden to the United States. So I'd like to introduce Elliot. You need to speak close into that, and there's a microphone here too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. I'll just get my notes up. I usually don't speak from notes, but there's a few things in here that I need to remember. So I hope that's okay.
Well, we want to see your answer.
Great. Okay, we got it. As Greg mentioned, I'm Elliot Darcy from Labour Against War. It's a privilege to speak in front of you all today. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on stolen land right now, and that land was never ceded, and that we need to form treaty with the Yagara and Turrbal people. It's ridiculous that we haven't already. I'd like to thank the mighty QNMU for having us here as well. I know you guys are gearing up for a fight this year. I'm a trade unionist myself. We've got the teachers going out on strike next Wednesday. We've got about 500 engineers from the Department of Transport going out next week. The firefighters are looking at it, and the nurses are having a look at their industrial action schedule. So it's a great time to be a Queensland trade unionist. I myself am part of the Rail, Tram and Bus Union, the Railways Union, so we'll be picking our own fights with David Crisafulli about March next year. So throw away your timetables for that period. Today, though, I'm here on behalf of Labour Against War, which is a grassroots network, thank you, opposed to Australia being dragged into another US-led war. We formed a few years ago specifically to oppose the AUKUS deal, the AUKUS agreement, which is a three-way defence pact between Australia, the United States and the US, the UK and the US. So it was signed by Scott Morrison, Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, and that should probably already start ringing alarm bells for you. These are not people with great track records on foreign policy. Yeah. You may remember this deal in the media because at the time, Scott Morrison dogged the French. So Macron was very upset about us because we backed out of a deal with the French to provide us with diesel, I believe they were diesel-powered subs. And then we signed up with a deal with the US for nuclear power subs. Very different. These are what you call the purchase of fast attack submarines, so fast attack nuclear submarines, and they push for a total cost of almost $300 billion. So 246 billion, I think they cost, and then there's an option for another $865 billion to equip them all with Tomahawk missiles. So we've just sent them you might have seen in the media, we just sent them another 800 million. Which means in total, we've already sent them $1.6 billion for this deal.
Richard Miles did.
That's right, exactly. The Australian government did. Which means we've already paid $1.6 billion for a deal which we have seen no benefit for. Yeah.
$1.6 billion would have bought 1.5 fully public hospitals.
Yes, it's unbelievable. We should be alarmed on those figures alone, but it's not us who will even be controlling these submarines. The deal says that if there's room in the US's for those subs, they're just going to take them. And even if there's not, the US will have strategic command over them, and they will rely on US shipyards, US personnel to man these vessels.
The US bases.
That's right. There will be a massive upgrading of US bases to accommodate that. What do they want to do with those? Why are they doing this? They are pushing the so-called forward defensive lines of Australia up north into the South China Sea. So those who pay attention to Australia's defence posturing and defence positions, since the Second World War, our view from John Curtin has been to defend the mainland. Right? We pulled Australian troops away from Europe to defend Australia against the war that was happening in the Pacific with the Japanese. That was the reason we moved from, you know, an imperial relationship with the UK to an imperial relationship with the US to defend the Australian mainland. This is not that. This pushes our defence lines way far north into an attacking posture and is much more in line with US foreign policy, which is to contain and encircle China. And that is exactly what this will do. It will contain and encircle China. That is what this deal is about. I don't want anybody to have any illusions about it. That's what's happening. The US pact, like, I want you to understand the scale of this. This pact will mean the largest concentration of US troops in Australia since the Second World War. Okay? That's when Brisbane was the headquarters of the Pacific Theatre, when General MacArthur was here. You still see his name popping up all over Brisbane because he had his base here. But it'll be the largest concentration of US forces in this country since then, since we were directly attacked. What I'm saying here is that this pact is designed to lock Australia in to a US-led war in the Pacific. This is our region, the Pacific. We like to think that we're isolated, but we're not. We have countries all around us. And I think that we should avoid a war in our own region, frankly. I'm not really interested in one. It will be us, it will be Australians who will lose their lives. It will be Australia that is directly under attack. And it will, the other members of this pact, the UK and the US, will be safe in the knowledge that they live on the other side of the Pacific and will not have to deal with it. In addition to this deal potentially undermines our nuclear proliferation agreements, so the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. It doesn't directly undermine it because we're not talking about weapons here, we're talking about fuel. And what I mean by that is these subs will be powered by highly enriched uranium, which is also used for nuclear weapons. This represents the first time that there's been a loophole used in the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which allows a nuclear weapon state to transfer highly enriched uranium to a non-weapon state. That has not happened before for signatories of this treaty. You can imagine the precedent we are setting here. If other countries want highly enriched uranium and they are non-weapon states, you can just get nuclear subs and then import the fuel. This encourages enrichment of uranium globally and provides a method for which non-nuclear weapon states can acquire highly enriched uranium. It's a disaster. Not to mention, there's a serious problem that is caused by the need to manage, transport, and store all of this waste. Once the fuel is expended, it's our responsibility under the treaty to get rid of it. That will mean digging deep, deep underground storage facilities encased in concrete, the location of which we have no idea where they'll be. And one such location that's been floated has been Woomera, which, is a continuing pattern of Indigenous land and Indigenous people being lesser than and expendable to the Australian military complex. Exemplified, of course, we all know about Maralinga. That's what we're talking about here. All of this is to protect the foreign policy agenda of a country which has become increasingly unreliable. Not only unreliable, but erratic. This changing government in the United States turns this deal from a bad one into complete madness, complete insanity. Donald Trump is an unstable, authoritarian leader with an America First agenda. He sees us and all of his allies as client states that he can squeeze. He's already put tariffs on us, supposedly his closest ally. And this agreement locks us into alignment with that government. And whatever he may choose to do, and we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know what he's going to do tomorrow. And this deal locks us in with that bloke. AUKUS has nothing to do with defending Australia and everything to do with the US projecting their power and their lethal force into the South China Sea in order to retain the US as the dominant power in the Pacific. You may have read that the US are reviewing this deal because it's not good enough for them, which is bizarre considering everything I've just told you about it. So I can only imagine that any such review of this deal would make it more expensive to us or include clauses that would guarantee the use of these submarines in our region. So it's lose-lose for us. We've already given $1.6 billion. We're not going to get that back if they cancel the deal. And if they go ahead with it, we get a much more costly situation where we go to war with our largest trading partner.
Tell us about what labour within your
Of course, yes, I'll get into that next. But I will say the capitulation of the Albanese government on this issue is piss weak and sellout, frankly. I am very much with Doug Cameron, former Prime Minister Paul Keating, former Foreign Minister Gareth Evans, former Premier of New South Wales Bob Carr, who have all stood up and said this is a ridiculous deal. And I agree with Paul Keating, this on foreign policy, this is not a Labor government. It's just not. I see no difference in foreign policy between this and the previous Liberal government at all. And I don't think there is one. But we are a group within it. We know that the purpose of law, we're a bit cheeky. We know that the US reads our papers. We know that they're interested and this deal is looking shaky to them. What we're trying to do is show that there is clear anger and dissatisfaction with this deal inside this country and inside the governing party to try to stop the US from going through with it or thinking it's going to be on shaky grounds. What we also would like a review so every Australian can see exactly how bad this deal is, because I don't think they know what's in the treaty. You know, everybody knows the story of when we dogged Macron. I don't think anybody knows exactly what this treaty does to this country. So I'll finish up because I've been talking for a while, but it is a myth that Australia, it's an old colonial myth that Australia is a isolated country. We're not isolated at all. The only thing that we're isolated from is Europe. You know, that's why it's an old colonial myth. We had to ship, you know, tons and tons of flour from the UK. People came over by boat back in the day, but we're not isolated at all. Indonesia is 200 k's off of our coastline. You know, throw a rock and you'll hit it. Most of people have longer commutes in this country, right? They are right there. We are not isolated. We just refuse to acknowledge where we are in the world geographically. We are not a isolated Pacific country off the coast of Europe. We are in Asia, and we need to find, our security in Asia, not from it. Okay, we should not be afraid of Asia. We should be finding our security among our friends there. Australia is a really competent middle power. It could be very influential in our region if we wanted to, if we weren't a sub-imperial power and completely controlled by the United States on foreign policy. The only way, our foreign policy should not be dictated by an erratic billionaire on the other side of the world. It's ridiculous. And the only way that we can uncouple ourselves from it is to get rid of this deal and completely uncouple ourselves from the US relationship. We need an independent Australian foreign policy. Thanks very much for your time, everyone.
Thanks very much, Elliot. And there might be hopefully there'll be time for questions and answers at the end of the session. So if you've got questions for Elliot, save them for the end of the meeting. It's my privilege to introduce Alexia Fuentes. Alexia is the Secretary General of BAYAN Australia, which is a multi-sectoral alliance of progressive Filipino mass organisations in Australia. BAYAN Australia is the overseas chapter of BAYAN Philippines, which is concerned to fight for national democracy, social justice and general genuine national independence. Alexia is a Filipina trans woman. She's also the former chairperson of BAYAN Melbourne, a Melbourne-based grassroots Filipino youth organisation fighting for national democracy in the Philippines with a socialist perspective. So it's my privilege to introduce Alexia Fuentes.
Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful conference and for inviting me to speak. I'm just going to prepare my slides for this presentation, if that is all right.
Okay, we've got an angel there. Oh, no, it's a message.
No, it's okay. This is good. No, it's all right.
Is it good?
Is that good?
Yeah.
So can everybody see my slides on the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, good. So welcome everyone. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. My name is Alexia. I am the Secretary General of BAYAN Australia, or Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, New Patriotic Alliance in English. We are a broad multi-sectoral alliance of progressive national democratic mass organizations of Filipinos from the Philippines, with various chapters and presence across the world and the diaspora. Today, I'll be sharing about the rising militarism in the Indo-Pacific with a focus on the Philippines under the intensifying hand of U.S. imperialism. The Philippines is increasingly being transformed into a frontline staging ground for Washington's strategic interests in the region. But this isn't just about bases or drills, it's about sovereignty, people's lives, and global resistance. So we will walk through the broader global militarist context, the internal conditions in the Philippines that make this possible, and the specific developments, military agreements, the EDCA base expansion, Subic Bay militarization, and the joint war drills like Balikatan and Kasanga, and we'll end by highlighting the people's resistance and the urgent role of international solidarity. The Indo-Pacific has become central in U.S. war planning. Amidst the war in Ukraine, genocide in Gaza, and tensions over Taiwan, the U.S. is laying the groundwork for a confrontation with China. The Philippines is being positioned as a key proxy and military outpost in this inter-imperialist conflict. This isn't peacekeeping, it is war preparation, and this cannot be stressed enough. We need to call it out. We are witnessing a deepening global conflict landscape driven largely by U.S. imperialism. Around the world, tensions are escalating. In Eastern Europe, the U.S. and NATO continue to expand arms supplies to Ukraine, while pushing NATO's reach eastward, prolonging the war and risking direct confrontation with Russia. In West Asia, the U.S. provides full military and diplomatic backing to Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, fueling regional instability and triggering growing anti-imperialist sentiment across the Arab world. In East Asia, the U.S. is escalating tensions with China through its provocations over Taiwan and the South China Sea, using alliances like AUKUS and QUAD to militarize the region. North Korea and South Korea have increased missile tests and defense posturing largely in response to intensified U.S. military exercises in the peninsula. Diplomatic tensions are rising. The U.S. is applying pressure on countries across the global south, especially ASEAN nations, through economic blackmail, threatening higher tariffs, trade barriers, and sanctions unless they align with U.S. policies. Washington is pushing nations to take sides in its strategic rivalry with China, undermining regional efforts at neutrality and cooperation. All the while, the U.S. continues to provide massive military aid packages over $3.8 billion annually to Israel, $14 billion to Ukraine, and increasing military funding and support to the Philippines. In 2023 and 2024, the U.S. earmarked over $100 million in military aid to the Philippines and urged it to increase defense spending beyond its growing budget. This year's national defense budget in the Philippines rose to approximately 256.1 to 271.9 billion Philippine pesos, or 4.4 billion to 4.7 billion US dollars, rising 6 to 12% annually, and an official push to allocate 2% of the GDP to defense, amounting to over 419 billion Philippine pesos, or 8 billion US dollars. Much of it going to acquisitions aligned with US strategic interests. Now, this is not accidental. It is coordinated, and the U.S. uses the threat of conflict and coercion to militarize allied nations, turning them into proxy agents for its global agenda. The Philippines, bound by colonial legacy and economic dependence, is a prime target in this global war machine. The semi-colonial and semi-feudal roots of subservience is the backdrop to all of this on why the Philippines is so open to foreign military occupation. Because it is a semi-colonial and semi-feudal society, politically independent in form but subordinated in practice to foreign imperialist control. Economically backward, dependent on foreign capital and ruled by a landlord elite, US imperialism, bureaucrat capitalism, and feudalism form the root of our problems. These conditions enable US troops, bases, and weapons to be placed on our soil. Now, these social ills enable and justify foreign troop presence, base building, and arms trade under the guise of security. The Philippine state remains a puppet regime facilitating US military goals at the cost of national sovereignty and people's welfare. US imperialism maintains this structure to serve its economic and strategic interests. The Philippines is kept export-oriented and import-dependent, producing cheap raw materials like minerals, coconuts, bananas, and sugar, while importing costly finished goods and technologies. We become a dumping ground for surplus goods from developed countries, undermining local industries and agricultural self-sufficiency. Filipino labor is commodified and exported through the labor export policy, making OFWs or overseas Filipino workers a key source of remittances while preventing national development. This dependency sustains feudal land ownership and bureaucrat capitalism, where local elites enrich themselves by serving foreign interests and blocking structural reform. As a result, our economy remains underdeveloped, our people impoverished, and our sovereignty compromised. In this context, US militarization finds fertile ground. Foreign troops and bases are justified as protection, while in reality they reinforce the same exploitative order. Now, the Philippines has a few US military agreements. The US maintains control through 3 core military agreements, such as the Mutual Defense Treaty, which was signed in 1951. This Cold War era treaty obliges both the US and the Philippines to support each other if attacked. In practice, however, it has always been one-sided, justifying permanent US presence and interventions in Philippine affairs, while the Philippines is expected to act in alignment with US strategic aims. The second one is the Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, signed in 1999. The VFA allows US troops to enter and operate the Philippines for joint exercises and training. It skirts the 1987 constitutional ban on foreign bases by classifying US presence as visits. It grants extraterritorial rights to US troops, limiting Philippine jurisdiction and accountability over foreign soldiers committing crimes on local soil. Now, the third one is the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, which was signed in 2014 but expanded in 2023. EDCA allows the US to build and operate within designated Philippine military bases. While technically not defined as permanent US bases, these agreed locations are under full operational control of the US, effectively serving as a permanent outpost for pre-positioning weapons, launching operations, and deploying forces rapidly across the region. These agreements were designed to preserve US strategic dominance while eroding Philippine sovereignty. They effectively circumvent constitutional safeguards, facilitating the return of US military control without formal base status. And the recent expansion to 9 EDCA sites, many near Taiwan and the South China Sea, directly aligns the Philippines with the US war preparations against China. The US has already poured over $82 million US into upgrading these EDCA facilities, not for national defense, but to serve US logistical and military interests. These agreements don't protect Filipinos, they entrench our role as a subordinate pawn in US imperialist strategy. Recently, in June of 2025, US lawmakers proposed building an ammunition manufacturing and storage facility in Subic Bay. This revives the former naval base for American logistical and combat use. This also provides a more permanent presence of foreign military assets in the country, risking national sovereignty and Filipino lives amidst increasing tensions in the region. On the other hand, the Philippine Defense Department has embraced this proposal, showing how our bureaucrat capitalist elite and puppet comprador class are complicit in ceding national sovereignty and are at complete odds with the Filipino masses and their interests, which they are constitutionally duty-bound to serve and defend. The Fisherfolk Group Pambansang Lakas ng Kilusang Mamalakaya ng Pilipinas, or PAMALAKAYA, strongly rejected the proposal in the US Congress to establish an ammunition production and storage facility in the former American naval base. In an interview, PAMALAKAYA National Chair Fernando Hicap urge the public as well as the legislators to reject the military installation that will make us a target of US rival countries that pose potential threat to the national security and to the livelihood of Filipino fisherfolks. We have already removed US military bases from our soil. We are concerned that their renewed presence is aimed at using the Philippines as a strategic location for provocative actions against China, HICAP added. Now, we also have several military drills, annual military drills being hosted in the Philippines. We have the Balikatan 2025 being the biggest ever, having over 17,000 combined troops, involving troops from Australia and other international observers. Advanced weapon systems like Typhoon and Nemesis were deployed for the first time, simulating war scenarios directly near Taiwan. These drills are not neutral. They normalize and rehearse real future conflict. The US is deploying its Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, or Nemesis, armed with naval strike missiles along the strategic coastlines of the Philippines near the West Philippine Sea. The deployment of the US Marine Corps' new land-based anti-ship missile systems, as well as other assets, including the Typhoon weapon systems and other organic ground-based air defenses, used in the war games only stoke further tensions and worry in the region, especially with worries that they may be left as a permanent fixture. And according to several news outlets, these weapon systems, strategically positioned along the Luzon Strait, are capable of reaching and hitting mainland China. Balikatan was also soon followed by the annual Kasanga Joint Australia-Philippines military exercises, where the ADF committed troops to be deployed to the Philippines in lockstep with the US. US personnel and weapon systems utilized in these war games are also often instrumental in counterinsurgency operations against Filipino revolutionaries and civilians in the countryside, including peasant and indigenous communities resisting militarization of their ancestral lands. Not long after, of course, they have also launched the Talisman Sabre exercises here in Australia and Papua New Guinea to further expand the regional war preparations and containment of China under the auspices of the US. So we have to ask, who pays the price for all of this? It is the Filipino people who suffer, communities are militarized, indigenous and peasant farmers are displaced, and activists are red-tagged and attacked by the state. Environmental destruction follows every base construction. These costs are invisible in headlines, but deeply felt on the ground. According to Asia Pacific Research Network, in April 2023, activists and humanitarians who came from a consultation with communities on US military bases were harassed by the Philippine National Police, and the activists include church worker Agnes Messina, who was also illegally detained in 2022 after a humanitarian mission in shelled villages in Gonzaga. A fact-finding mission led by the peasant group Dangayan Cagayan Valley was also barred from the armed forces of the Philippines from visiting the town of Asinga via Bagao, Cagayan, a campaign center for peasant farmers Tanggol Magsasaka or Defend Farmers. Reports that similar patterns of harassment were employed against first responders who investigated the bombings in Gonzaga, Cagayan in 2022. Meanwhile, government-affiliated online trolls attacked and threatened those who joined the massive demonstration against US bases in Tuguegarao on April 18, 2023. Residents of Cagayan expressed their opposition to the province serving as a staging area for an impending US-China clash. There are many more incidents we can cite which involve various human rights abuses and cases of harassment involving the presence of US troops and other personnel as well as state security forces who protect these military activities at the expense of human rights and welfare of the Filipino people. We cannot also forget, of course, the Subic rape case of Nicole versus Daniel Smith, or the rape slay of Filipina trans woman Jennifer Laude at the hands of US serviceman Joseph Scott Pemberton. In both cases, the US stepped in and absolved the perpetrators with the Philippine government, allowing them to eventually return to the US despite the ongoing trial and public outrage as Filipinos clamored for justice. US imperialism is the number one threat to peace. We have to be clear about this, and it does not simply respond to regional and global conflict, it engineers it. The US provokes and sustains wars to secure markets, extract resources, and dominate geopolitical rivals. It creates dependency through military aid, trade conditionalities, and basing agreements. It deploys fear and instability as tools to justify arms buildup and foreign intervention. In the Philippines, the US military presence means being drawn into future wars, particularly with China, continuing economic subordination through defense-centric spending, enabling state repression through militarized governance. This is not defense, it is occupation, and it must be opposed. The people resist, but we resist and we will continue to resist. From BAYAN to ILPS, or the International League of People's Struggles, from the homeland to the diaspora overseas, from the legal mass movements to the revolutionary forces in the countryside, Filipinos continue to oppose EDCA, VFA, and all imperialist impositions. In cities, we mobilize through protests, education campaigns, and legislative lobbying. In rural areas, organized peasant and indigenous communities resist land grabbing and forced displacement due to militarization. Filipino youth organize to expose how militarism threatens education, jobs, and national development. The people demand genuine land reform, national industrialization, and an end to foreign basing, and a sovereign foreign policy rooted in peace and people's rights, not imperialist dictates. International solidarity is also key. Your solidarity matters. Australians must oppose ADF's participation in war games like Kasanga and Talisman Sabre, question the militarization of the region, and resist AUKUS and QUT. We must challenge the logic of war being sold to us as security. We call for churches, unions, peace activists, and First Nations movements to support Filipino communities in struggle and develop stronger relations and mutual solidarity across the region. The fight for Philippine sovereignty is part of the broader global resistance to imperialism, militarism, and neocolonial control. International solidarity strengthens the people's struggle and helps isolate and defeat imperialist aggression. In June, an international conference on imperialism and wars of aggression was held in the Philippines. It was organized by various organizations from different countries that met together for stronger coordination to align strategies and promote collective action and solidarity. From this conference emerged the idea of a peace caravan. This peace caravan will be a series of internationally coordinated protests in September later this year. To conclude, US imperialism is preparing for war, not peace. The Philippines and the region are being militarized at a dangerous pace, but people are resisting, and we must stand together for sovereignty, for justice, and for genuine peace. Thank you, mabuhay ang sambayan ng Pilipino, long live international solidarity, and down with US imperialism. Let us stand together to defend peace and people's sovereignty across the world. There can be no genuine peace without justice, and no justice without national liberation. Maraming salamat po, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alexia. So while we've got Alexia on the Zoom hookup, are there any questions for her in relation to her presentation? Or I was wondering if you might comment upon, in the news here in Australia, we've heard about the building of airstrips on Filipino islands in the South China Sea. I was wondering if Balabac, I think, is an island that comes to mind. I was wondering if you might comment upon that particular development.
I'm sorry, what was the question again? The airstrips?
Yeah, just commenting upon the development of airstrips in the South China Sea on Filipino islands.
Yeah. So is this the airstrips that are being built by China, or?
No, it's been in the news recently in Australia. The perception given is that they're airstrips that are being developed by the Philippines, perhaps with US involvement.
Yes. So yeah, any structure that is being constructed in the Philippines with the coordination and funding by the US is all part of the US foreign policy and its strategic containment of China. And of course, like I have shared in my presentation, these structures that are being constructed in the Philippines are not without the human costs to the Filipino people, apart from the Philippine sovereignty being eroded. So I'm not particularly familiar with these airstrips that you have mentioned, but they could be part of the strengthening of the EDCA facilities that are being strengthened and reinforced in the EDCA sites along the West Philippine Sea coastlines, and I think this is to facilitate the launching of U.S. troops from the Philippines in the event that the Taiwan conflict spills over. We know that the Philippines is close to Taiwan, especially it's the northern part of the Philippines, and it is a strategic location for U.S. war preparations and launching pad for U.S. aggression. And this places great concern to Filipinos everywhere who will be used as cannon fodder for U.S. imperialist war aggression. And we must oppose any type of structures or war preparations in the region, especially led by the U.S.
You need to speak.
Yeah. Hello there. Look, a question about China. How are they countering this growing militarism of the Philippines? What is their soft power in the Philippines? Do they have any?
Yes, so with China, it had a previous softer relationship with the previous Duterte regime, who is now in the ICC detention in The Hague in the Netherlands. But with the current administration under Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the current administration is closer to the US in terms of its relationships. But in the recent State of the Nation address of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he declared that the Philippines is an enemy to none, and that the relationship with the U.S. He's pretending that it is a neutral position, that is a neutral stance. But like I said in my presentation, there is no such thing as neutrality in these war preparations, and it is clearly and plainly obvious that these are all part of the U.S. foreign policy. So now with China, it has condemned, the Philippines' relationship with the U.S., and they have condemned the U.S. For dragging the Philippines into the conflict with China in the South China Sea. In terms of influence over the Philippine government, it has very little influence, although it had a closer relationship with the previous Duterte regime. The Philippines remains a U.S. client state, and this basically influences its own foreign policy as well. And like the previous speaker has said as well about Australia having a strong independent foreign policy, that is the same demand that we are trying to achieve in the Philippines, to have an independent foreign policy free from U.S. imperialism or other foreign imperialist powers.
Okay, any other questions for Alexia? Okay. On behalf of the conference, I'd like to express solidarity with BAYAN Australia. Alexia, and thanks very much for your presentation today.
Thank you as well for having me.
Now, when could I get the too? So we do have another speaker from this session present today, Elliot Darcy. Did anybody have questions that they'd like to direct towards Elliot? Did you want to come up? Or?
Give me an easy one, yeah.
Well, it's probably pretty easy. And now I start to think it's probably very obvious. I have a question about, it seems like all my life there have been Labor politicians opposed to war, and yet we're here now. So can you shed some encouragement on that thought?
I think it's I think it's the worst it's probably ever been. I think it's the worst it's probably ever been in terms of Labor and foreign policy. I know there have been people fighting all your life, but if you look at Paul Keating's foreign policy agenda in the 1990s, he echoed very much what I said earlier about finding our security in Asia rather than from it. Following that, we saw sort of disastrous approach to international peace and particularly refugees in the Rudd era, and following that, after a 9-year hiatus, we've come back with the Albanese government essentially mimicking the Liberals' view on foreign policy. So I'm sorry this is not a hopeful answer, but it's actually never been worse. It's never been worse in the Labor Party for this stuff. I know thousands of Labor Party members and former Labor Party members, because they've left, are incredibly betrayed by this government and incredibly angry. So the only thing I can see to do is I'm not the kind of person that just sits around and gets angry, is to try to show the United States that there is not consensus in the ruling party that this is a good idea. We know that their foreign intelligence agencies pay attention to our news. We want to give those foreign intelligence agencies some pause to think that maybe the governing party will back out of it. So the answer is I don't really know how we turn this around. I'm not one of those people that says we only do things one way. I know there's some groups that have a go at other people that do things differently. I think we all have to do our best in our areas. For me, it's using my connections to try and stop this deal. For you, it may look differently. Eventually, when we're moving to the storage facilities and to the shipping of goods, I think we should be moving towards blockades and direct action, frankly.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. I wonder whether you might give us a little bit more information about the organisation Labour Against War,
Yep.
how it's grown,
Mhm.
what it hopes to do, and on another angle, we know that were there to be increasing march to war, we as a people have to find a way to intervene and disrupt. I'd like to hear what you might have to say about the role of trade unions in that disruption process. You're from a transport workers union, a very vital union to be disruptive, as would be the Maritime Union of Australia and other critical unions that could in fact build the barricades basically and stop Australia's ability to wage war with the United States.
Okay, there's two there. I'll try to answer both of them. Labour Against War is an internal lobbying group in the Labor Party, which has amongst its membership people like Doug Cameron, Bob Carr. I don't think Paul Keating's officially joined, but he said things in the media which support us opposing the AUKUS deal. We're trying to get the government to oppose the AUKUS deal. You will often see when AUKUS is mentioned in the media, a Labour Against War spokesperson. We've been very deliberate with our positioning. We know that the media loves to stir shit up within the ruling party. We know that, so that we're taking advantage of that strategically. That is the purpose of Labour Against War. We have a state conference coming up. There is currently one in Victoria for the Labor Party, a Victorian state conference. My understanding is I've been getting text messages throughout this whole thing, updating me on getting those motions up. Those motions are to withdraw, review, and ultimately withdraw from AUKUS. Review one to show the Australian people how much of a shitty deal this is, and secondly, once that's revealed, to withdraw from it entirely. Those are our stated goals in the upcoming conferences. There will be one in Queensland soon. I hope to get both of those motions up. That is my goal. Secondly, we all do our best. We're all working towards the same thing here. Secondly, on unions, it's a very good point. The RTBU has long said that we want transportation of dangerous goods on rail rather than trucks. So if there's highly enriched uranium, I can imagine there could be potential. Yeah, but if that's what the government intends to do, then yes, certainly my union may play a role in that. Trains do derail. Yeah, for various reasons. The Maritime Union, you're quite right, is also could also be utilised there. What you're doing, and I'll give a brief education, because unions are a bit hamstrung with industrial law nowadays. They can only go on legal strike in very specific circumstances. It's when a union agreement is expired and they're fighting for a new one. However, there is a piece of legislation called the Workplace Health and Safety legislation, which allows workers to stop work under unsafe circumstances. And so trade unions have been able to utilise that loophole in the WHS legislation if there is, for instance, a picket line, which they may say could cause them physical harm. Okay, so I hope you can understand where I'm going with this. So that can be utilised as long as it is coordinated with the union. I wouldn't just show up and because war fees are pretty tough. You want to let them know before you go. And the other part of it is I hope there will be many union activists amongst the unions who will join us when it is time to do blockades if they try to store nuclear waste on Aboriginal land. When there's time to go to the port, when it's time to go to the railway station, I'm sure people, even if they don't have direct contact as part of their union, as trade unionists will have those values and show up. Thanks.
Question from Marianne.
Yep.
Thanks so much for the presentation and to Alexia's presentation as well. I was overseas during the federal election, but I did manage to vote. Labor won an overwhelming majority, which I don't think they deserved, but they won it because there was a fear that Peter Dutton might get in. So the so-called safe option was let's vote Labor. Do you think that means that they feel they've now got a right to just proceed, you know, regardless of the opposition to AUKUS, and pursue all these ridiculous policies? They're not addressing climate change. They're not addressing the housing crisis. They're not addressing the nuclear weapons issue. And they're going full steam ahead with AUKUS. So, I mean, do you think they've been actually encouraged just to do that because of the election result?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think the obvious answer is yes. I'm not sure. I've been part of a party for over 10 years now. I joined when I was a public servant under Campbell Newman. So that probably dates me a bit. So that's why I joined the party, because it was sacking everyone. So I hope that gives you a bit. That's also incidentally when I first got involved in my union. But you will probably see over your lifetime second and third term Labor governments, and they tend to get a bit arrogant, unfortunately. I think this is not no exception. I think absolutely the election result has buoyed the ALP for on its current direction. I think the only thing that is going to change that is a massive grassroots uproar over this deal and this foreign policy agenda. But the thing is, we know that they're not stuck in these. With enough pressure, they do fold. I hope there's no more politicians in the room anymore, because I'm not going to say anything nice about them. A lot of them are quite narcissistic, self-involved little people, and who are looking no, and are looking for the next way that they will lose their job. And the next way that they lose their job is always electoral politics. We have already seen some faltering on foreign policy with the amount of international pressure building up. I don't give the government credit on that. Like I said, I think it's pressure. I think we can do the same for other issues.
Margie, did you want to come up and put your question?
Oh yeah, I have a question for Elliot, but it's a very kind question. You know what I'm like about the Labor Party. So my kind question about the Labor Party is, where are you? I can't even see you. Disappeared. So my kind question is, the most interesting thing that's happened, I think, is the unaffiliated unions. I think that's the most hopeful thing we have. The CFMEU were on May Day. They stopped at the Palestine crowd and they made a speech in support of Palestine. They've been on the ground with homeless people. They have 20 paid organisers and 100 unpaid organisers. And they're unaffiliated with the Labor Party, which means no transactional bullshit at election time. And what we find is that the Labor Party, and this is the same with the NTEU, and there's a couple of other unaffiliated unions. And I think this gives us a lot of hope because there's a lot of resourcing in terms of organisers. We just lost, you know, whatever it was, 10 organisers in the Greens offices in the last, you know, the last election. So we don't even have those organisers anymore, or those offices. So what would it take for another dozen unions to disaffiliate from the Labor Party so that we actually have independent unions who have got independent organisers, independent strategic thinking, and aren't in this transactional bullshit that requires a terrible sort of transactionalism that amounts to nothing when we get down to what is we get a few unionists to get better pay and better outcomes or whatever for themselves. It's a very selfish, self-oriented program, you know, and like that, it's not like they transact and they say, look, we want you to stop, you know, we won't take anything this year except you stop that war over there, to stop killing those people, and in response we'll look after you and we'll make sure you get re-elected. We never have that type of transaction. We only have a sort of a self-oriented transaction. So what would it take for another dozen unions to disaffiliate?
It's a really good question. I really don't have the answer to that. I'm very sorry. Another I don't know what it would take for another 15 unions to disaffiliate. I will note that the CFMEU has been suspended from the party. You're quite right. Which wrong. I'm obviously against the anyway, but I'm not here to talk about that. So I won't get into it. I note that, you know, other building trades unions like the plumbers, like the ETU, have also they've disaffiliated from the ACTU. You wonder how long they will last in the Labor Party going forward. And, you know, nurses and teachers and a lot of public servants have been disaffiliated for a long time. I don't know the answer. What I will say is what the Labor Party is not a socialist party by any stretch, but there have always been socialists in the Labor Party. There always have been. There's always been a socialist tradition. It has not dominated the party. It's not controlled it. So what we try to do is try to find as many points of connection as we can with the broader movement in order that we can all work together to try to change this stuff. I will say personally, though, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention overseas to Jeremy Corbyn. When I said that you know, there's always been socialists in the Labor Party, I'm not sure that's true to the UK Labor Party anymore. They seem to have expelled all of them. As it turns out, though, there's a real appetite for those kinds of policies and the views that those people said. You know, the Labor Party under the Corbyn leadership ballooned to 500,000 people in membership. I think it was genuinely, you know, at least a democratic socialist party, although it didn't, you know, so it was able to be. I don't think the UK Labor Party is any longer able to be reformed. I think probably potentially ALP is close behind that, and which is very disappointing and for me. But I'm looking very keenly over at the UK and to see what a truly independent socialist party can do.
Yeah, thanks very much, Elliot. So, but Elliot and Annette sort of touched on a very important point, I think, which is looking at the potential disruptive power of the trade unions. And we're all familiar with, you know, what's happened in Australian trade union history with the part played by unions in things like the Vietnam War moratorium, where unionists took action in support of the anti-war objective of the movement, when unions took action around the visit of the Springboks to Australia in 1971. So there was massive union support, political, you know, for political purposes, and that trade union support was key, instrumental in terms of bringing about changes in relation to those political issues. So, but there's work to be done, and I think in part it's a matter of union renewal. If people want to get involved via their unions, or if they're not members, are interested in joining their unions and becoming involved, please step up to people like Elliot and other concerned union activists to do that. So I'd just like to ask people to put their hands together to thank Elliot and Alexia.